writing it, there was another epic poem that I had done called What the Ego Said and How the Id Replied. It wasn't exactly a narrative. It was just this kind of heady kind of poem. And so I started To Enlighten the Gods, and I finished that around December of 2001. In the meantime, I was trying my best. The minute I finished it, I copyrighted it. And then I started shopping it to publishing companies, ones that you didn't need an agent for, ones that were black publishing companies, and they were looking specifically for poetry. And I had done my research, and I found out that as of the copyright and whenever it would be published, going back to its copyright, it would be the first quote-unquote African-American narrative epic poem in America.
Damn.
So I naively thought that everybody would be like fighting and pushing over each other so that they could, publish it. And I was totally wrong about that. I sent out maybe 30 letters, and I sent out my manuscript to about 30 publishing companies. Every last one of them rejected me. But their rejection letters weren't their sort of templated rejection letters that you see. They weren't just like, we can't handle this right at the moment. They were very personal. And they told me that we're terrified to take this on. There's no way this would get us in trouble. And I was like a little naive because I saw the adventure of it all. Yes, it had its commentary, but I saw the sword fights. I saw, the guys hanging out, watching the women, dance by the fire and trying to get with one of them. I saw all that and the family. And even when it came down to the fights, I saw it as the adventure. I mean, I wasn't naive to what I was saying, but I just thought it all blended well together. Apparently not. I had an Afro-Latin publishing company specifically say to me, we wish you the best because this needs to be out there, but we can't take it on. And I was just like, jeez. And this woman at the time that I was with, she was like, bruh, you don't understand what you've done, do you? And I'm like, oh, I do, but I thought I'd have some backup with me. And she's like, no, I've never read anything like this in middle school, high school, college, grad school. I've never seen anything like this. And you see it for what you want to see it, but they are immediately seeing it for what it is expressing overall, which is the fight and the fight back against white supremacy. And I knew that was there, and she was like, but this is different. And I knew that tag had a bit of a monologue. It was something that even when I was trying to memorize it for what I call the fight sequence in the Roman poets between Makeru and Tag, when I was trying to memorize it for performance, it got to me, it was extremely emotional. I would get emotional and say, oh, I can't do that. And so I thought about what he would say, and he said something to the effect of, I confess, gladly dressed in this smile, I reaped the queens of 1,000 black cultures. I swarmed around like a vulture. I captured them for labor, had them raise my children who would only rape them later. I savored on the breast, thighs, and leg, held them down to hear them beg, fed on their flesh until culture rested in my veins. I claimed kingship through fiendish acts. I ripped black children from their black wombs so that I could get back to what should have given birth to me. Oh, did I reveal my own reality? My dark tinge of jealousy? Jealous of the dark indeed. You see, I hate black because I am not black. And I'll kill to be that, as well as to make lies facts, to have this whole world hate you as much as I do. And I have tricked you, your people, your mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, potential lovers. I've tricked them all to kill one another. I fixed every court trial, and I've put the whole world in denial, while my hands around your neck choked you of your last breath, took your culture's wealth and gave it to someone else if I cannot rightfully own it myself. And I have never felt guilt. So you better hold your sword firmly at the hilt. or I'll cut you in half. And I don't care for your cultural beats or your cultural rhythms. You, my next victim, I'll slay you like I did your father. A fool with a dream, his life wasted and spent. And you, mock Teferu. To me, you're no different. I attack him in a flash, fierce, deadly, quickly. Tag parries, moves my sword aside, takes a stride forward and swings, bringing one end of his lance up. I duck and the attack glides over me. I stand firmly, block the attack aimed at my back, and quickly shield my front to block the brunt of another blow. I push his weapon away, sway, and begin to throw flurries like snow, but he adapts and flows too smoothly. Moves me back, retracts his weapon, and then attacks with both blade and feet. He forces me to retreat, fall back. My mind is not intact, in its rightful place, so I stall, silent. Thinking too much on revenge, I cannot think of and remember any of my culture's lessons. So even with this sword in my hands, I have no real weapons to fight with. I am the ebb in this flow. Tag grows impatient and initiates another conflagration, so I take a step, skip, twirl, advance. My sword clashes with his lance. Sparks explode like warm air slamming against coal. Thunder rolls, our bodies glow. Mine bright like gold, his dull, grafted, and in the trillion-year skein of history, only a mere 6,000 years old. Wrapped in oppression and 7 deadly confessions. The power of our battle makes the earth split and spit flames. The soil becomes scorched. The wind howls as earth is in pain. The land rises. Our fight heightens. We duel like fates. Tag makes a fatal move. I block his attack, but my sword shatters on impact. It breaks. I drop the hilt and just await my fate. Tag kicks me back. The land risen. I fall off the edge. My hand grips the ledge and I hang. Tag towers over me as fire boils below me. My grip is slipping slowly. Quickly, Tag turns and battles another. The earth rumbles a disastrous war zone, and I understand I'm no longer alone. Tag's clash is with a better half shadow-casted figure. Well, there is a shimmer of light as hope is in sight. My eyes fight to stay open. My strength struggles to focus, and I hold on to the edge with all strength left, and I can hear Tag scream, "Ah, my hand! You bitch, you cut my hand!" He screams and retreats. A gentle hand catches me. Feminine, yet rough. And I mean it, I'm talking tough enough to battle Tag. She lifts me up, my savior. Once together in spirit, we were both creators, and our spirits populated 57,280,000 miles. Her description is burnished brass like Christ from the Bible. Sun dressed, she's both Ra and Oshun moon blessed. No, it's not a shadow. It is her dark, rich, beautiful, cosmic-colored flesh. Exhausted, I hold on to her, lose breath and ultimately consciousness. Saved by this mysterious, beautiful black African goddess, this black warrior, still seeking his revenge. But for now, I can rest. I don't see what the problem is. But somebody did. A lot of people did. They saw a problem. Of course, they heard Tag and, set the whole world on fire, blah, 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 blah. And I understand that. But I thought it was cool. You see, their swords are clashing. They're glowing like Shonuff and Bruce Leroy. The land is splitting and fire is going everywhere. It's like a Japanese anime and the Book of Revelations rolled into one blunt. But, they had a problem with it. But I continued to submit to publishing companies. But it wasn't until I went to an open mic that I would frequent in Albany, New York, in upstate where I'm from. It was a Caribbean restaurant named Clayton's, and they held an open mic every second or first Thursday of the month, and it was called the Soul Kitchen. So I went, I performed, everything was cool, but there was a woman there by the name of Tracy Wingfield, and she got up and she got on the mic. She did 2, yeah, right? Yeah, that's a name, right? She did 2 cool little poems, but she was there to say that she had a publishing company. And I got her information, I submitted the Ronin Poets, and she was like, yeah, I want in. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. This was not the end of the troubles. She still needed some funding for her business. And unfortunately, myself and some other people were like, you need to go into these banks and places, financial service places, and give them a fake plan. Because she was guaranteed to help any black artists she took on, show them how to navigate through the entertainment arena, and also make money. And she would make money, and they don't want black people making money. So financial institutions and banks who looked like they're against each other started calling each other and talking about her and saying, don't help this woman. We were able to print up 3,000 from a local printer. We were able to print up about 3,000 books, very expensive, but we made it back when I would perform and sell those books, but we couldn't keep doing it like that. After 9/11, big bookstores started to say no for gigs that I had. They were canceling them left and right. Financial threats started to happen to her. Death threats started to happen because of the Ronin Poets. And it wouldn't be until about 2005 where we finally were able to get it to worldwide distribution. And while that seemed, it was bittersweet. We were happy, but we were exhausted as well. And this was all happening at the same time that I was doing lectures, because I would always kind of talk about that. And I had created my own publishing company because she showed me the ropes. And I just had so many ideas to do, and I couldn't just sit around and wait for just one. And I knew it, I knew the troubles that, she was having and all types of stuff, but I had to move on. So I created my own publishing company that first started off as being called Ancient Art of Facts. It would then be called Twin Griffin Books. Again, Twin Thomas, my actual name, Justin Thomas. And Griffin is my mother's maiden name, so Twin Griffin Books. That's what it is currently. And I switched it over when I started writing the Ghost of Gabriel's Horn, the first book in the Fable Avenue saga. So when I started to write again for a book I would publish on my own, I started with a book of short stories called 12 Stories High, The Imaginative Trip Through a Black Mind. This book came about because at the same time I was going through all that, back in 2000, I teamed up with this brother who wanted to make black films in a way that nobody had seen before, and I wanted in as well. And we started to have powwows and creative sessions, and he was, a very good director. Problem was we were, 22, 23, 24, 25. All the people we knew who would be committed to do something were moving on. They were getting jobs. They were moving out of the neighborhood. So I took a lot of those short screenplays that we wanted to do, and I started turning them into short stories between 2000 and 2005. I had created maybe about 30 short stories, and I narrowed it down to 12 and put out 12 Stories High through my own publishing company. That was sort of a return to form and a crossroads. It was a return to form in two ways. I'd become Justin Thomas again. If you know me as Teferu, just call me Tef. But I'd become Justin Thomas again like I was when I was originally writing manuscripts all the way back in middle school. It was also returned to form because I was writing short stories that would, lead me to writing and publishing my first novel. And that's what I was doing when I started writing. I was writing short stories, and I was always doing my best to try to write a novel. So some of my short stories were like 30 pages long, 40 pages long, 50 pages long. And so I was back on track until, of course, like I said earlier, 1990 when I started writing manuscripts. So here I was writing short stories before I would write a manuscript to publish. I started writing when I was 4 years old. On the day, April 21st, 1981. Two things happened that day, and the second of which I got a little blue kid's typewriter, Buddy L Easy Writer typewriter for my birthday. And because of eBay, I was able to find a make like that back in 2018. And I bought it for myself, so it was kind of cool. So I got that, and a little close to midnight, I started click-clacking away in my parents' bedroom. April 21st, 1981 fell on a Tuesday. My birthday tended to fall within spring break in upstate New York. So everybody was home. Both of my parents are educators. My mother's a first grade teacher. My father was an 8th grade math teacher, and then he became a part of the school administration of Schenectady. I don't remember a time, because my parents were educators, that I wasn't, reading or writing. So I wrote like a quick little short story about a guy who lived in a house with roommates, and he tried to guess who had come home because he was alone by himself, and then one of his roommates came home, and he tried to guess who it was by the noises that were being made, because he knows one roommate goes straight to the kitchen, makes something to eat, another goes upstairs, closes the door, calls his girlfriend, another one goes straight to the bathroom, so on and so forth. But there's these other nuances, and it's extended out the mystery, but ultimately he guesses who it is when they come into the room. He's like, "Hey, how's it going, Mike?" And it's Mike. That was based on my room being at the top of the stairs. I would try to guess who was coming up by the sounds of the footsteps, whether it was my mother, my father, either of my two brothers. It wasn't a long list of suspects. But, I would try to guess, and I knew the cadence of their walk, whether it was fast or slow, they were excited, whatever emotion they were going through. So they say, write what you know, and I was 4, and that's all I knew. The first thing that happened that day is we went to go see the re-release of Star Wars. At this time, Star Wars, this movie that was originally released a month and 4 days after I was born on May 25th, 1977, it had gone through several metamorphoses. With this official re-release, the first metamorphosis was that George Lucas added to the movie's opening crawl, Episode 4, A New Hope. When it was originally released on May 25th, 1977, it didn't have that. But in 1980, Empire Strikes Back had come out, and that had the title Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. And George Lucas, would tell people, look, we're in the middle of a great saga, and this is Episode 4, here's Episode 5, and so that the two could coincide, he had the title added. Within the revelation of The Empire Strikes Back that was released in May 1980, we saw that Darth Vader was Luke's father. This changed a lot of scenes in the movie. So like when Luke asks Obi-Wan, how did my father die? He gives this pregnant pause, and there's all this emotion that's rushing to his countenance, and he's like, oh, wow. Originally, when people saw that, they just thought he's reliving the memories of his good friend Anakin being killed. And here he is, he's got to tell his son. Now with the revelation that Anakin is Darth Vader, it looks a little different. And with one scene in Empire Strikes Back when Luke leaves Dagobah and the ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Yoda, that boy is our last hope, and Yoda says, no, there's another. Now you get the understanding that there was a plan. When the galaxy fell, they would hide these two children of the most evil man of the galaxy, and when the time came, they would train them. But Obi-Wan's been sitting here for 20 years doing nothing. Let's disregard what Disney has done. Doing nothing, but here it is, it's his time to tell this kid, I got something to tell you, but he's like, how do I do this? So this whole scene is now something new. Another scene that is new is when he sees Darth Vader in the Death Star, when he's sneaking around the Death Star. Originally, it just looks like he's surprised, and he's coming in, he says, oh wow, there's Darth Vader, let's fight. Now, he's seeing this guy who he hasn't seen in 20 years, and the last time he saw him, he didn't have the armor on. He was a little scarred up. According to Lucas's early notes, a little scarred up, missing some limbs, but he looked like his friend that he helped train in the ways of the Force and was a Jedi fallen. Now he's this dark-clad other person that he says in the next film, more machine now than man. So this same look, scene hasn't been altered in any way, now looks different. Now it's not a look of surprise, it's a look that says, oh wow, this guy's lost it. this is not the guy I knew. And it says all that just because of one small little revelation of a film that was released, prior or before this re-release. And the same thing is done with C-3PO in a visual effect sort of way. The mask never changes expression, but depending on how Anthony Daniels, who's playing him, moves, and of course how the lighting is, they can make C-3PO look like he's sad, he's happy, he's excited, he's startled, he's scared. And so now, with metaphorically this new light and revelation of what happened in Empire Strikes Back, these scenes now look different in this new lighting. And I was looking at this at 4 years old going, I want to write stories like that, where there's these nuances, where if you go back to the beginning, you go, he kind of gave us the answers from the beginning. Or this line means totally something different now that I read chapter 7. So that was a way for me to understand stories. And I finished that one story. It had its nuances, but I've been documenting my imagination ever since that day. And I've been picking up other, nuances from other stories. So 12 Stories High had that sort of, going back home kind of feel. It also was a crossroads because I had sort of mapped out the remaining aspects of my career and what I would write later. Two of the ideas that I came up with was a book in this creative writing session that ultimately birthed 12 Stories High in 2006. I published it May of 2006. Part of one of the stories that I had come up with was a book called Code 47, Memoirs of a Hip Hop Heist. The other book that I had come up with, the idea I had come up with, was A Company of Moors. And with Code 47, with 12 Stories High, I wanted it to be like a shotgun. Like it was this shotgun blast of stories that you knew that I, as author Justin Thomas, could write anything I wanted to write. If I saw a story, I would write it. It didn't matter what genre it was in. So 12 Stories High has all these different type of genres, and I kind of modeled it after a Prince album, because Prince, when he did his albums, every song was different from the last, even if the songs were of the same genre. The funk song that played wasn't the same as the funk song that played after it, or slow jam. And so I wanted to model not only the arrangement of stories in 12 Stories High like that, I wanted to model my career like that. So I looked at these two ideas that I had, Code 47 and A Company of Moors, and I knew A Company of Moors would be big. It's an epic, it's a historical epic. I knew I also would have to do a lot of research for it, as it was about the pirate companies in North Africa that the Moors would control, kind of like the mafia. In the late or in the mid 1600s, where this story takes place, the pirate companies ran from the 1500s to the 1700s, but I chose the 1600s for the story to take place in. And I knew that it would be heavy. And as much as I love Code 47, Memoirs of a Hip Hop Heist, it couldn't be the follow-up to A Company of Moors. I thought it was a comedy. I thought it was funny. It's in the vein of heist films, Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, Harlem Nights. It's in those, in that vein. One quick thing I'll say about these books, because I want to get to the Fable Avenue saga. When I published Code 47, and by this time I had met my wife, and she was my editor, which is an interesting dynamic when you hand her your manuscript and she hands you back all of this red that's everywhere, and you go to sleep, she's asleep peacefully, and you're just like... But I actually like when we have to sort of cipher about the work that I'm doing, but it can be a little nerve-wracking. You hand your heart to your heart, and she gives you her honest opinion. But I had, much like the Ronin Poets, but instead of like publishing companies, I was sending to black reviewers. And I thought that this book would get glowing reviews. And I was totally wrong. because again, this is a time where there are specific types of books that Black people are reading, and Code 47 just wasn't it. For the reviewers who worked for companies, the heads of the companies called me or they emailed me. And one guy said, the reviewer, because I mean, I read her review, it was wow. It was terrible. But he said, you shattered her world on what it means to be Black, and this is how she's reacting. Oh, wow. And other people who were heads of companies or reviewers, they didn't publish their reviews, they didn't overview them, and they were all like, we can't do it. We actually love the book. But, you know, what we'll do is we'll put an overview on our website and we won't blast it out since it's not an official review. And one reviewer who didn't work for anybody, so she published her review. In order for her to make a review, she had to change the entire plot of the book for her to kind of understand it and then review it. And she said that Keith Joseph, the main character, she said he would do anything to get into the music industry, including murder. That's nowhere near in the book. And I was telling this, I had some glowing reviews too, but there were a lot of people who, when it came to the bad reviews that were just reading the book casually, would attack the bad reviewers. They're like, you didn't understand this book. And it is just based on a heist, and what just kind of made me upset is that, you know, this metaphysical heist to steal the concept of hip hop back, it was kind of a prank they were pulling on the music industry. Now, there are murders, but it's by the bad people in the music industry. Because they want to make consequences on this album that these guys release. But as in heist films, when they sit around and you do this and you do that and they make up everybody's job, this is exactly like that. So for her to change the entire plot, and this time my wife gave me the moment, and she said, Black people, we have this knee-jerk reaction to learning about what we really should be doing. You made these people responsible and you took whatever excuse, you put all their excuses in that book, and you made a counter argument that they couldn't counter. So of course they're going crazy. There's one guy who was ahead of the a review group of people. He told me, he's like, I used to work with addicts, and I'm seeing the same reaction when addicts sort of realize it's them. And I was just like, it's a comedy. And so that was, another like, oh wow. Because remember, this is 2008 now. This is before it was okay to be # woke. It was before, white movie studios were giving out candy saccharine movies for Black people, so we go, oh, we can do that. This was before all that. So I'm trying to, and there's very few speculative fiction and Black science fiction and Black fantasy authors out there, even in the mainstream. So that's what I'm fighting against. So then there was A Company of Moors. That got pretty good reviews, but that's because they didn't understand in terms of history how they could attack it. But that, a quick overview, because I've done a lot of talking on A Company of Moors before, but I was just very intrigued of the organized crime that was going on within these pirate companies. And I created a fictional landmass called Adonga Maharim. I created a fictional city, Almari Afrik. I created a fictional kingdom called the Genhai Kingdom, fictional tribal nations, the Ogun Shagun Mashek, the Aljasi, and all of the politics between them. And I wanted it to reflect not only those times, but a hint at even organized crime. We had it on lock. And I kept seeing, especially in hip hop, a lot of people were doing stuff like The Godfather, which is a great film, but nobody who looks like us is in it. And stuff like Scarface, again, a great film, but nobody. And they're always bigging up these films. And so I wanted to make something that's like, well, if somebody came across this, they would be like, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about, Bo Youssef. Let's talk about the Bela Bay Bahar. Let's talk about, all these different, these guys, and maybe have drawings that would look like the Moorish chief drawing, but they would be of the leaders of these companies. And one of the most, the first line that popped into my head when I had started putting notes down for A Company of Moors was I had seen a movie, a two-part miniseries on HBO about Elizabeth the First. And there was this one dude who was wearing this really cool suit, and I imagined what if a Moor was wearing it. And then I thought about 4 Moors wearing it, and somebody saying something to the effect of, they don't look like pirates, those Moors over there. And somebody saying, well, what do they look like? They look like governors. And so I was like, yeah, these guys, and as much as I wanted it to be like a mafia type thing, and the word mafia, although they try to say means my sister, and supposedly like the first person that was killed and revenge made upon them. Mafia comes from an Afro-Arabic word, mafil, which means to gather and to be a part of. The mafils were families in Al-Andalusia that they were just, they were carpenters, they were city guards. It was a family that, had a skill, and everybody in that family had a skill. And so I wanted to get into that a little bit as well. And so I started putting the book together. But I was also like, well, what follows this? Because this is pretty big. And I was working on the Fable Avenue saga and putting notes to it. It originally started as, continuing on with theme, a comic book universe I was creating in the early 2000s called The New Ancients. And I had scripted the first four issues. And I kept looking at the issues over and over again, and I said, no, there's something here, but I'm going to put it on the back burner until I get to it. And I knew the story that could follow A Company of Moors was The Ghost of Gabriel's Horn, because it's this very poignant story. And it has its sort of nuance with a line on the very first page in the first chapter that says, there's been a long pause in a story that's narrative. It has been extremely long. And when you keep going to see the different time periods that the story takes place in, you see how long this story has been going on. The Ghost of Gabriel's Horn begins in 1957. The lone car going down a road in Mississippi, Clarksdale, Mississippi, going to the crossroads. In the car are 2 jazz musicians. In the passenger seat is Horatio Peters. He's a trumpet player, 24 years old. His father, Pete Peters, was an amazing trumpet player, and he would blow up Harlem and all parts of New York City in the 30s and the 20s. And in his 13-piece band was Horatio's mother. Her name was Virginia Tara Peters. In 1933, Pete Peters was murdered on the very night that Horatio was born. Horatio's mother, after giving birth and learning of the killing of her husband, took Horatio, spared him away to New Orleans, where she raised him. Over time, she started to realize that much like his father, he had an affinity for not only music and jazz music, but the trumpet, and she nurtured this. She was a bit of a piano player as well as a singer, so she taught him scales. She, let him hear her voice, and as he grew up, he played the trumpet. When he turned 24, Virginia Tara Peters became ill and she died. Before she passed, she gave her son his father's music book. There were 5 songs in the music book. And after her funeral, a few days that passed, These songs that were written by Pete Peters and somewhat co-written by Virginia Tara Peters as well, Horatio wanted to pay homage to his mother and father's spirit, and he tried to play them. And he notices when he looks at them, there are these strange, very alien notations that he can't play. And he doesn't really understand what they are, but he sees some earthly musical notations within the work, and he decides to try to play the work, but work his way around the notes he doesn't understand. And it comes out horrible. And he's sitting there thinking to himself, well, I know I'm not quite near where my father is, but I shouldn't be this bad. But the fourth song in the book is made up of total musical notations he understands. He plays it beautifully, and he says to himself, it sort of calms him down a little bit. So he takes a day or two, and he tries to play the music again. Horrible. Takes him a few more days, tries to play again, horrible. After resting on a few more days, and before he takes up the horn again to play, there's a knock at his door. He opens it, and it's a tall, imposing young black man, but a little older than Horatio, at the age of 27, and his name is Johnny Conquerute. Now, Johnny Conquerute is based off of the African-American hoodoo Loa High John the Conqueror. It's a root that you can eat, gives you protection, sexual prowess, which also goes into Johnny Conquerute's personality. He loves the ladies, and it's been mentioned in blues songs like Muddy Waters' Mannish Boy. He says, I think I go down to old Kansas stew, I bring back for my second cousin, that's little Johnny Conquerute. And so I created a character who'd be the embodiment of that. And Johnny looks at Horatio and he says, he came to pay his respects because he heard his mother passed, and he says, my father was the piano player of your father's band. And he's just like, they used to tear up the town. And I play piano, and trying to find your house, I was asking around, I hear that you play trumpet. And he just kind of lays on him the information, my father killed your father. It's not entirely true. There was a rift that happened between Joe Conquerute, Johnny Conquerute's father, and Pete Peters, Horatio Peters' father. At the same time this rift occurred, there were three men who really wanted to know the secrets of Pete Peters' playing, because it was almost magical. And in looking for where he was on a certain night, Joe Conquerute, in his anger, assisted them and told him where he could be found, told these three men where Pete Peters could be found, and they murdered him. Joe Conquerute is in prison for it at the time of the story. Feeling guilty and knowing what he did, he just takes the rap for it. And instead of fighting, Horatio invites Johnny inside. They start, they jump on piano, jump on the trumpet, and they make amazing music. Johnny tells Horatio, why don't you, close up shop just for a little bit, follow me back to New York, and we'll be like our fathers, and we'll just light the town up. And Horatio thinks that this is needed, so he agrees. But first they tour sort of the Southeast. And after the music, after the ladies are loved, Horatio finds a private moment to play his parents' songs. And again, he just can't do it, and he gets frustrated so much that in a drunken rage, he pours alcohol on the book, lights a match, and throws it on it. And the alcohol bursts into flames and instantly goes away, but the book remains unscathed. The mystical notations that he can't quite decipher suddenly glow a particular color, lift off of the page, and he inhales all of them. And then he exhales them, and they go right back onto the page. And then suddenly he starts looking through the book, and he realizes there are now more than 5 songs. There's 10, 15 songs, and there's notes written in his father's handwriting. And one of the notes says, the Fable Brothers at the crossroads, that's who are my teachers. So he tells Johnny, we got to head to the crossroads, and that's where the book starts up. And when they get to the crossroads, there's nothing there. It's just grass separated by this, these 4 roads. But Horatio has an instinct. And so what he does is he plays that 4th song that he knows he can play. And the song is called Carrefour, Carrfor. Carrefour is another name for Kalfu, a malevolent spirit who guards the crossroads. And if you cross him wrong in a ritual, he will tear you apart. But Horatio plays the song beautifully. And out of one of the quadrants of the crossroads, a house materializes. And an old man steps out. He just looks at both of them. He says, you Pete Peters and Joe Conqueror's boys? And they say, yeah. Are you one of the Fable brothers? He says, yeah, I'm Jackson. Gaston is my brother. He lives across the street. And they look across the street and there's nothing there. Jackson says, well, he's not home right now. Why don't you boys just drive your car up on the road or up on the grass and come on inside? I'll make a little lemon water on ice. I know why you're here. So they do. They drive up onto the grass. They walk inside after the old man. They close the door, and both the car and the house disappear from existence. Inside, as the house goes outside of time, inside, Jackson Fable leads them to the kitchen and tells them to sit in the dining area, and they do. And he makes them some lemon water with ice. He pours some water into some glasses. He cuts up a lemon, he squeezes it in both, stirs it up, and then he hums over both glasses, and ice clinks and clanks into existence. He sets the ice down, and then he sits in front of the boys, and he starts to go through his own history, and he says, we lived here for 40 years now, my brother and our wives before they passed away through one circumstance or another. Gaston and I are from up over there north, small town outside of St. Louis. We wanted to stay even after the Klan killed our father. Cowardly men. But on that same night, we became outlaws, so our mother moved us south. New Orleans. We stayed with our grandmother. That woman had a terrible disposition, but she was sweet enough to teach us most of the tricks we know. And when he says tricks, he means conjure. And in the rest of the series, conjure is either known as an incant, which is a small little spell that can be done through ritual or through the twiddle of the fingers or through speaking a phrase. And a personal conjure is your power, almost like a superpower. But at the time, in 1957, they just referred to conjure as tricks, as magic ebbs and flows in the world. And at the time, it's just these small things that can be done. He also talks about the fact that he and his brother Gaston are at war with a white sheriff by the name of Curly Burnside, who's a hexist, practices hex magic, and he's been killing original people who can wield conjure. He's been killing them for a long time, and we've been at war with him. And he says that's the circumstances in which their wives were killed. He then goes into the history of Pete Peters and the band and how he came down. He said a horn was in a case and fell from the sky not too long